Good evening and welcome to The Big Fight. I'm Vishnu Shom. As we get set to celebrate 75 years of India's independence, there is perhaps one question that is more important than anything else. What exactly does nationalism mean to us? Was it the same as it was, or is it the same as it was when we grew up? Or is this India and this democracy very different from what it once was? The bedrock of our existence in India has been our democracy, and our holy book has always been our constitution. Some say India's freedom index is plummeting. Pride in the nation has given way to hyper-nationalism. Civil liberties are routinely trashed. The freedom of press is a joke, as the old India makes way for a strident Hindu Rashtra where minorities are increasingly second-class citizens. Is flying a flag on Independence Day enough to make us forget this reality? On the other hand, there are those who insist that we are stronger than ever before, more secure, economically more prosperous, and with a greater standing in global affairs than ever before. Which India touches your nationalism nerve? We've got a wonderful panel today. I'm going to introduce them before we get on to the first punch. That part of the show where each of the participants has 1 minute to make their introductory comment. So the question is this: what does nationalism mean to you? My panel has Khushbu Sundar, Yogendra Yadav, Yamini Iyer, Hindol Sengupta, Dr. S.Y. Qureshi and Mohua Moitra. Mohua, would you like to start this program in 1 minute? What does nationalism mean to you?
In one word, nationalism is something that one feels. It's not something that needs to be expressed every day. I've been growing up and being born in India, the pride of being Indian, I think, overpowered every other feeling, every other emotion as a human being. And I think that definition of nationalism has to be passed on from generation to generation. I don't see that nowadays. And I think this hyper-nationalism, that having to express solidarity or having to express symbolism all the time to prove nationalism is not the inherent visceral nationalism that we were born into, where we knew we were Indians and that we were more proud of being Indians than of being anything else. And we didn't need to wear it on our sleeves ever. I think that's the nationalism I would like to go back to, and that's the nationalism that I still feel very deeply inside me.
Okay. Next up, Khushbu Sundar, in 1 minute. Khushbu, your definition of nationalism before we start up the big fight. Go ahead, Khushbu.
Hi everyone. To me, my nationalism is about wearing me being an Indian on my sleeves. Taking every moment with pride, explaining myself is not nationalism is about. But taking pride and saying that yes, I'm an Indian and I have no two ways to explain myself of being an Indian. To me, nationalism is about unity. To me, nationalism is about harmony. To me, nationalism is about being together, solidarity. Now, if somebody finds it difficult to express themselves as a national or as a nationalist, then I find that as very, very difficult to digest. To me, nationalism is about being a proud Indian. Swear by what you believe in as a country fellow of this very, very rich and beautiful country, what we have called India. To me, nationalism is about being an Indian. That's it.
Okay. Yogendra Yadav, what does nationalism mean to you, India at 75? What does it mean to you?
My nationalism is the nationalism of India's freedom struggle, not the thin, fake European variety that is being presented to us today. It means holding out 3 promises and trying to fulfill it collectively. 1, democracy. 2, diversity. And 3, development. Making these 3 promises real for everyone and standing out in the world as an example of these 3 is what would make me proud as an Indian. And non-fulfillment of these promises also makes me feel ashamed, because there cannot be any nationalism that does not make you feel ashamed of what you are doing if you are not fulfilling what you really believe in.
Okay. Hindol Sengupta, what does nationalism mean to you today?
Yes, Vishnu, thank you. Nationalism to me is very simply a deep understanding of a country, a nation's history. In most countries, and certainly in India, we had, and perhaps also have today, a very limited understanding of our own culture, civilization, and history. And I don't think any nationalism of any kind can be built with a false sense of history. I think there is great need for Indians and in the other parts of the world for people to really understand their civilization, their culture and history. And to me, my nationalism is built on the idea that India is a civilization. It has a particular civilizational ethos. It has a particular civilizational promise. And in trying to fulfill that civilizational promise is the manifest destiny of Indian nationalism.
All right. Dr. S.Y. Qureshi, go ahead, sir. What does nationalism mean to you?
To me, the nationalism is the pride in our constitution, in our great constitution with all its values, the great democracy, India's pluralism, and which of course is going through a little bit of a trial, but I think it's a temporary phase. But the basic ethos of India is democratic, secular, and I'm sure it will survive.
It will survive. Yamini Iyer, go ahead.
To me, nationalism is a deep pride in the aspirations and emancipatory potential of democracy, in the constitutional promise of equal citizenship, and the possibility that India held in 1947 and still holds today, despite the trials and tribulations, of being an exemplar in the world of what it means to be liberal, to be democratic, and to create a genuinely equitable and inclusive society.
Okay. Well, we've got everybody's first punch. Let's start up the big fight this evening. My first question to Khushbu Sundar. Khushbu, our Tiranga is beautiful, it's stunning, it means so much to all of us. But does nationalism necessarily have to be synonymous with having to wave the flag on August 15th? Can't we be national and feel a sense of nationalism in our hearts without having to wave our flag?
Definitely not. You feel at heart that you're a nationalist and that's it. That matters the most. You feel you're Indian at heart and that the matter ends there. But to me, waving a national flag gives me an extra sense of pride of calling myself an Indian. The idea of holding a national flag, we don't do it every time. It's only on the 15th of August is what we're asking you to do. And I think all of us as Indians, we must celebrate our independence. And when I say celebrating our independence, 75 years, it marks a very, very significant year this year as a 75 years of our independence. So why not? Why not take a pride? Nobody's forcing it down your throat to do it. But all we are asking is a humble request to others. Take pride in holding a national flag and let's prove that we are together as Indians. We stand united no matter what.
Moha Moitra, the government says that, look, wave our flag, it's wonderful, we have an opportunity to do it. But is it as simple as that, particularly when one hears about cases where people are told you won't get your ration unless you buy a flag?
Yes, Vishnu, now the national flag, it is actually very ironic that we are being told that we must wave the national flag, and if we don't do it, then we are somehow less patriotic, by a government that has its roots in an organization that when the flag committee adopted the flag in July 1947, the organizer, which was the RSS mouthpiece, actually said that this is not the flag, this is not Hindu, and there are three colors in the flag which will have a very bad psychological effect on India. And when the RSS was banned after Gandhi's assassination in 1949, it was only when the Home Secretary then wrote to the then head of the RSS, Golwalkar, and threatened him saying that we would not lift the ban unless you guys accept the tricolor, that they very grudgingly accepted it. Even today we have RSS leaders walking around saying we want the Bhagwa Dhwaj or whatever it is, the saffron flag as opposed to the tricolor. So I don't think they are in a very sort of a pretty position of telling us that flying the flag is synonymous with patriotism. And the flag for us has had a very special place in all our hearts. We fly the flag. We've always flown the flag on 15th of August, on 26th January. And yes, it's a very special independence this time, 75 years for our country. But you can't, when we've seen these videos and it's everywhere, when they first lifted the Khadi stipulation, because they wanted 20 crore flags flooding the market, Today you have flags where the length and the breadth ratio of the flag is not correct. The Ashok Chakra is not correctly placed. The colors are not right. So this government is so caught up in its usual dhamakebaji that they fail to understand that patriotism runs more than just putting out 20
All right,
flags
Khushbu,
in the market.
respond. Lots of points by Moa. Khushbu, go ahead and respond.
No, I would like to know they have a problem. People who have a problem against the BJP and the Narendra Modi government, they have a problem with that, or they have a problem with RSS. RSS doesn't rule the state, the country. RSS is not what is ruling the country, but it's BJP, and it's headed by JP Nadda. And we have a very wonderful, one of the brightest prime ministers of the world, Mr. Narendra Modi, heading the country. So when we give orders, he says that wave the national flag. I don't see what problem they have. So they have to be very clear whether they have a problem with RSS or they have a problem with the BJP. And I would like to remind Ms. Mahua Moitra saying that it is CPIM which did not even fly. And they said Jhuti Azadi, and they did not fly national flag till 2021. So it's not about RSS alone. It's also about what the Communist Party they talk about and the communalism they talk about. It's the same. So we don't keep going back to that. We would say here the BJP is saying, here the Prime Minister is saying, let's wave a national flag and prove our nationalism. It's not about proving what you believe in. It's about proving that we are united, we are in solidarity, and we stand united as a country, fellow men, as a country, as anybody else. So I think this is what should be the motto. This is what should be the driving force, that here we are standing together, united, despite the differences. And democratically, these differences are a must. These differences should be there. Otherwise, we don't have a democratic society at all. So we are happy that we have differences
half a
within
second,
our
let me
country.
get Moa to respond. Hindol also wants to come in. Go ahead, Moa.
Very quickly, Vishnu, I don't just want this to become both me and Khushbu, the other panelists waiting, but I'll say this very quickly. I think it doesn't behove that a democratically elected Prime Minister of the largest democracy in the world to order its citizens to do anything, to quote Ms. Khushbu. I don't think that's correct, A. B, I think that it would be, I would really like to keep this on record for later, to have a BJP spokesperson come out to say that the RSS doesn't run the government. It's wonderful if they could come out and say that it doesn't. I would like them to say that with posterity too. And the third thing is that when we all fly the flag, it's not about flying the flag, but this is about the BJP again, like they're hardcore Ram. They come in and they take things which belong to the country, that belong to Indians, and somehow make it their own, and then use that to prove that the rest of us are all lesser Indians or lesser Hindus. They do it with gods.
You don't fly a flag. It does not make you anything lesser than an Indian, Mohaji.
So we have no problem. This is our flag. It's not the BJP's flag. We don't need the Prime Minister.
It's not. That's what we say. It's our flag. You have a problem saying it's a BJP flag today.
So I think that's what's most important here.
Hindol, go ahead.
That's what the problem is. You think it's a BJP flag. We say it's a national flag. You think it's a BJP flag. That's where the problem is. We request you, we humbly request you, we urge you to fly a national flag and feel proud in it. But you look at it saying that today the national flag is a BJP flag. Yes, BJP is the single largest democratic elected party in the world today. But that does not mean that
both of you, one second, my other panelists are getting very upset. Hindol, go ahead. Hindol, go ahead.
If I may, Vishnu, I don't understand. I mean, you know, countries in every part of the world and prime ministers and presidents in every part of the world urge citizens on landmark occasions to really celebrate with their own national flags. I mean, I think it's maybe there has been one stray incident somewhere of someone misbehaving. We're a country of nearly 1.4 billion people. I mean, my own mother, who's never said this ever to me, said to me today afternoon that, well, you know, everybody's flying the national flag. It's 75 years. Maybe we should put up one too. And this is a very simple thing. I don't know why we need to over-intellectualize it, over-complicate it. Can there be a stray incident here and there? Of course, there'll always be a stray incident in our country. There will always be some mischief makers. There'll always be some fools. But it's 75 years of our independence. I mean, what's the big deal if any government or any prime minister urges people to fly the national flag? I mean, it's all diktat. Nobody's going to go to jail.
Okay, no, I get the point. Yogendra Yadav, will you be flying a flag on August 15th at your home?
I've always respected the Indian flag, always. And it's I'm extremely happy to see that those who actually did not use the flag of India for the first 50 years after independence, Nagpur RSS headquarters did not have a flag. Now they are getting enthusiastic and making up for what they did not do in history. I think this should be celebrated. Yes, any prime minister of any country can and should urge the citizen to fly a national flag. What's wrong with it? The only problem begins when more than a few stray incidents start taking place. Mind you, the incident about Haryana, which is being talked about, it's not merely one isolated person who appeared on video. It is actually an SMS that has gone around to everyone saying, you shall not get ration till you come out with 20 rupees and purchase the national flag. Things of this kind actually take away from the beauty of national flag. And I'm sure the Prime Minister would need to do something about it, or BJP workers, BJP leaders, officials would do something about it. Look, there cannot be any nationalism without some kind of symbols. Tiranga is our beloved symbol of it. And remember, when there are beautiful stories about Tiranga, when during the freedom struggle, people were in jail and they wanted to create a Tiranga, they could make green out of the green leaves and grass that they could get there. They didn't know how to create saffron. So they actually took out blood and created that color. So this is that beautiful Tiranga that stands for our freedom struggle. Yes, everyone should be invited, but any attempt, even at the mildest coercion, takes away from that flag. This is something that we want to remember. The other thing that we need to know and remember is, what does this flying of Tiranga mean? Does it mean deep sense of happiness, pride in the country, in what we have done? If so, of course it's a great thing. But if it means that a certain kind of formal symbolism is taking over, anything substantive, if it means that the very positive Indian nationalism is giving way to a fake, plasticky European nationalism, then someone like me would feel very uneasy about that extent.
Okay. I want to go across to Yamini and just change the topic a little bit. Let's move to the core of our identity, which for many is the basis of our sense of nationalism. The fact that we could all, or we are all meant to live together in this country as equals. It doesn't matter what religion you're at, what your sexual orientation is, what your sex is. We are all Indian, right? And therefore, is your sense of nationalism affected today in India, where, for example, religious tolerance is almost invisible in so many cases?
So I think just, one of the pieces of the conversation that we were just having about the national flag around the coercion of the state is a very important issue that needs to be discussed outside of its politics, across political regimes, and through our, as we have built the modern nation state. One of the big challenges has been that the violence of the state has often been used in coercive ways to undo the constitutional promise of equal citizenship. The use of coercion by arms of the Indian state has been a part and parcel of the story of of modern India, and in fact it is the power of democracy that has consistently pushed back and reminded the powers that be of the Indian state that it has a promise of equal citizenship that it needs to deliver to all citizens. That's the bedrock of India, and that's the bedrock of the conversation we ought to have today, and that should be the source of pride that we bring to this very momentous moment of our 75th. Equal citizenship means Article 21, equality for all, regardless of religion, creed, caste, class. That is a promise that the Indian state has not fulfilled yet. In fact, consistently and especially in recent times, we have taken many steps back towards making our identity much more of a marker than than the promise of equality, solidarity, and fraternity, which is core to our constitution and core to the modern nation. That's the challenge we confront at 75. That's what we should be fighting for. So religious tolerance, caste equality, class equality, these should be the core values that we should fight for the next 25 years as we take our Shatabdi Sankalp.
Dr. Qureshi, would you agree that the glass is half empty in India's case if we are unable to achieve the true equality which we are bound to seek, whether it's religious, whether it's caste, whether it's class?
Well, equality is a much bigger issue, and basically we have been talking of poverty, the economic inequality, and that is a problem which cuts across all communities. And of course, the government has been fighting this for the last 75 years. We have achieved a lot. We used to have starvation death 60, 70 years ago, but not anymore. We are food surplus. We have progressed a lot. We have become an economic powerhouse, and all within our constraints. So, and I would like to mention to you that I am 75. I am one month older than independent India. Therefore, my history and India's history coincide, and I have lived in a plural society. All people around my house, they were Hindus, they were Muslims. We lived together, we played together, but slowly, gradually, there was some shift, some migration. So, which was of course very disturbing.
How do you compare that India, Dr. Qureshi, with this India? Dr. Qureshi, how do you compare that India with what you see now, when the homes of minorities are bulldozed?
Yeah.
When people are taken into police stations and bulldozed on the basis of having been Muslims, when they had nothing to do with protests allowed?
Vishnu, yes, Vishnu, I am very optimistic, because if I compare it with 1947, 1948, there were millions of people who were slaughtered on both sides, and despite that, within 10 years, things got normalized. Now, if you compare it with what we saw in 47, 48 to what we see today, is nothing. And I think it is just a temporary aberration. And I'm sure, and as I've been saying, that India is secular because Hindus are secular. 80% of Hindus are secular, which is why when India had the option to adopt the Hindu Rashtra in 1950, they opted unanimously for a secular constitution, when 83% of the Constituent Assembly members were Hindus.
Okay, all right,
so
sir.
Basic ethos of India is secular,
point, Dr.
and it will survive.
All right. Moa, are you as optimistic?
India at 75, there are a few things, and most of the panelists have touched on this. But yes, India today, the poor are definitely better off than they were in 1947. But if we look at where we should have been, there's only 40% of working age Indians who are employed today. Even in 2005, this number was 47%. 27% women in the workforce in 2005. Today we are looking at 20%. And unemployment continues to be at very frightful levels. But aside from the economics of it, if you look at India at 75, the basic social trust, which was the bedrock of our society, has broken down, because citizens are turning on citizens. And I think Yamini touched on this. So this lack of unity and diversity is quite frightening. The second thing is the scientific temper. It's almost like when the upper levels of government display a complete lack of scientific temper, that percolates down, and all of a sudden it becomes okay to say anything. You can say there's no climate change, people are just getting older. You can say light lamps and clap and coronavirus glow. So there's going to be a tremendous struggle to rid us of this disease of medievalism, which has been brought on in the last 10 years by this government. So I think for India at 100, not only have we got to start from where we were at 47, but it's almost like we've got to undo this disease of medievalism, this disease of bigotry that has plagued us, and not to mention the basic bedrock of the constitution, which was federalism, which has been systematically dismantled. So I think from India at 75 to India at 100, it's going to take a lot of work. So of course I'm optimistic, otherwise we wouldn't be here, but I do think that requires us all to take stock of what's happening and take active steps, because it's not going to happen on its own.
Khushbu wants to respond, so does Hindol. Khushbu, go ahead.
No, there's nothing to respond to Mamaji, because whatever is said and done, she's going to come back as a broken record with the same thing, that there's no democracy, there's no secularism, there's no equality. I think India at 75, when the world is looking back at India, and here when we are talking about, being somebody as an Indian, you flying your national flag with a pride. Here when you have Har Ghar Tiranga, has actually skyrocketed the national flag sales. Traders are finding it extremely difficult to supply, because there's so much of demand of Har Ghar Tiranga. I mean, on 15th August, आप कहीं पर signal पे खड़े हो and somebody is selling you one small paper flag for 50 paise to put it on your shoulders. You pick it up with a pin and you put it out and you take pride in saying that I'm an Indian just for one day. I mean, I don't see that why they have a problem in flying a national flag or just saying that, yes, I'm going to fly a national flag. It is not about anything else. India is moving forward. India is right at its best. India, the GDP growth, the way we are surplus with the food. And Qureshi Saab said, yes, we have been moving forward. And here when the entire world is looking back at India and saying that here's one country we really, really need to be worried about is India, because it's flourishing, it's progressing. I think we are on the right track and we need to move forward. 25 years down the lane, when we are celebrating 100 years, I am glad that all of us will be sitting, if we are alive, we are going to be here and celebrating the same 100 years with a lot of pride and say, and our children are going to be together and they're going to say that together as Indians, we take pride in carrying a national flag in our hands. So that national pride of a flag, that Tiranga in our hand, Tiranga in our homes, I think that is the pride we need to take it forward. This is not about any political parties. This is not about a difference between the political parties. Democratically, we need to have these differences. But what to me is extremely important is this 75 years, we together as Indians, whichever party we belong to, whichever politically differences we have, we put that aside. We come together as Indians and say, yes, Har Ghar Tiranga, and the world is going to look back at us and see us, look at us with pride and say, here is one country which is standing united. So I'm
Yogendra Yadav, would you like to respond to that? That, you know, showing our flag, it's an occasion for all of us to come together, or do you believe that this is symbolism without any substance?
I mean, how can anyone disagree with wanting to fly flags, especially those who had opposed it now that they have fallen in line? The RSS, I mean. I mean, I can only welcome and celebrate it. How can I have any problem with that? I think she probably inadvertently said that the world would look back on India. That may have been inadvertent, but actually very apt. Look back at what India stood for and look at what India has arrived at. I mentioned three things. In fact, in passing, let me also say that I entirely agree with Hindol Sen Gupta when he says that you have to build a nation on its civilizational values. India has to be built on its Swadharma. And democracy, diversity and development that I spoke about represent India's Swadharma. About development, let's be honest. For the last 75 years, we have made small accretions, but our overall record is not something to be proud of. And this cuts across all the regimes. Inequality in the last 25 years or so has grown rapidly. In last 8 years, very brazen. On democracy, I know it will make Khushbu very uncomfortable. What do we do, Khushbu? If someone doesn't know physics and they get bad marks, you can't blame the teacher. The fact is that democracy in this country today is in a very bad shape. I would not say this is the first time. Emergency was the biggest blot on India's democratic career. Today we are in a situation which is a shade worse than that. But it is diversity that concerns me most. India was diverse. India continues to be diverse. But we had an ideology of India, an idea of India, a constitution of India, which affirmed diversity, which celebrated diversity. And today, sadly, we have a regime which enjoys popular backing. I would not dispute that. We today have a regime that goes against this fundamental, foundational idea, not only of my nation, not only of my constitution, but an idea which is inbuilt in my civilization. So as an Indian who's proud of its civilization, its culture, on which our nation is built, I feel utterly, utterly sad and ashamed of the manner in which minorities, and not just religious minorities, soon it's coming to linguistic minorities as well. We think diversity is a problem. In that sense, we have reduced our nationalism, I would once again say, to a very poor pathological form of European nationalism, which Indian nationalism never was and never should become.
Hindol, go ahead.
Let me begin by agreeing with Yogendra Yadav that India's Swadharma, as it were, includes a fundamental commitment to pluralism. You would have to be mad to disagree with that. I entirely agree with him. Let me also say, though, disagreeing with him now, that while it is true that Indian nationalism had differences with colonial nationalism, and there are many historical reasons for that, the structure of the modern Indian state after 1947 was deeply colonial in its institutions, in its framing of the arguments that it posited to itself, in the way it looked at itself, its worldview. It was a deeply, deeply entrenched colonial structure. It was colonial in every aspect, in academia, in bureaucracy, in governance, and that colonial structure lasted way beyond the time perhaps when it was perhaps in any shape or form useful. Now, this colonial structure at its very core had to be uprooted. Now, has this uprooting, the act of uprooting this, will it cause churning? Will it cause disruptions? Will some really crazy people behave in a crazy way? Of course, all that is true. There's no denying that there are problems in India, right? But fundamentally, I believe that from today onwards, the point that we become 100 years old as a nation, as a modern nation, we will no longer be an entrenched colonial state. We will truly be what, Yogendra Yadav called, our Swadharma. We will go back to the true ethos of our own civilization rather than adopting, borrowing and in many ways maliciously using a colonial framework, a colonial pedagogy. This had to be uprooted, and I think the process of uprooting this has been one of the most wonderful things. It actually began, I argue always that it began with liberalization. And many older politicians don't even think that liberalization was a great thing. And I think liberalization was a wonderful thing. I think it began with that process, right? And it has continued till now. And by the time we are 100, I do believe the fundamental colonial edifice of the modern Indian nation state will go, and that will be a good thing.
Yogendraji, go ahead. You respond to that.
This might surprise Indol, but I actually agree with you. I agree that colonialism in this country persisted far beyond independence, especially in matters of culture. The only place where I agree in state structures, in bureaucracy, I agree in our imagination of what needs to be developed, because our people who make our economic policy have not had the courage to imagine that India can have an economic future which is different from the past of Europe. So yes, we have been colonized. The only place where we might have a disagreement is that in the last 8 years, especially after BJP is coming to power, this is true and the worst form of colonialism that we have seen. I insist, we can get into a separate debate on this. No one has been more colonized than those who call themselves Hindu nationalism, because it is a very, very poor copy of German nationalism. There's nothing Indian about it. It is not surprising that the day on which Gujarat government announces that they would teach Gita to every child, they also announce that there would be English medium. It is not surprising that this Prime Minister, if there's something he's fond of, it is somehow having a jappi with white leaders. It is embarrassing. It's cringing to see my Prime Minister get into that kind of a forced jappi. There's nothing more colonial than these rulers.
All right. Yamini, as we begin to wrap this up, we are seeing a sense of hyper-nationalism being played out in social media, which is now a part of our lives. It's a part of the lives of more than 1 billion people in our country. A social media which follows the trajectory of my way or the highway, where if you want to disagree and it's not, then and you're not following the path followed by the majority, you're immediately shut down. Is our diversity of opinion being shut down by what some want us to believe in social media?
Vishnu, let me just first say that I think the last few minutes of this conversation, I would reframe this and say that and ask whether the core values of the Constitution, the core values on the basis of which we founded the modern Indian nation state, were colonial. I do not believe that the values of democracy, that the values of secularism, pluralism, and tolerance, which are part of secularism, the values of equality, the values of social justice, the value of inclusion, are in any way colonial. Those are values of what society, that a democratic society should aspire to. Those are values of emancipatory citizenship that we should aspire to, that we must aspire to, and that we have failed to achieve, but we must work towards as we get to 100. So I think this argument itself is taking us in a very different place. We have to ask whether we created the right kind of structures of the Indian state to be able to achieve the promise of our constitution. But I firmly and strongly believe that the values of our constitution were in no way colonial. They were the values of a progressive, imaginative, modern nation state. That's what we need to hold on to. And that goes to the question of diversity of argument, diversity of views.
And
a truly democratic nation believes in deliberation, diversity, agreement, and disagreement. Any kind of polarization of opinion, as we see on social media, and by the way, this is not an Indian problem, it's a global challenge, is in fact the antithesis of the values that the Indian nation stood for in 1947, the values which we celebrate on the 15th of August, the values for which we unfurl our national tiranga. Let's not forget the core constitution in all our everyday political arguments.
Moha?
Yeah, Vishnu, one of the most important things that we need to remember is that this is not an argument about us versus them. I see the narrative here also by the BJP spokesperson saying that, you know, we are flying the flag, we are patriots, not the rest of you on the panel are just these terrible people who don't respect the flag. And this kind of narrative is something that the BJP does very well. And I, for one, am absolutely tired of it, and I'm sure you are too. So this is not about the Tiranga and Ghar Ghar Tiranga and those of us who are apparently on the other side not respecting the flag. That has nothing to do with it. We've had the flag on 15th of August every single day as long as I can remember, and we do it this year too. So, and it's very special, 75 years, and we as Indians all realize how special it is and we feel it. But so it's not about this usurping of symbols, and this is something that really defines fascism, where you take a symbol and you make it your own, and anyone who doesn't exactly pay obeisance to the symbol in the manner in which you prescribe is suddenly deemed a traitor or unpatriotic. And that is what is defining the new India, and that is what is so scary. And this is something we must be aware of and stand up to, because most of us actually get bullied into thinking, oh dear, if I don't do this, then I'm going to be branded anti-national. That's not right. Yeah. We have to define what is nationalism in our own heads and be with it.
All right.
Even if we show the narrative is those of us who are speaking against against the thing are somehow anti-national. I mean, that's not.
All right. If you are national, then you are anti-national. Khushbu, is that the way we should be as we talk about nationalism and our democracy? Or final words, and then we'll wrap this up.
Definitely not. Like I said at the onset of this debate, we stand united, and that is how we should be. We are in a room with different opinions, and that is the democracy I love about my country. This is the difference of opinions is what keeps my country growing from stronger to be a more stronger country in the world. And I think people who have been talking about RSS, people who have been talking about being anti-nationals, people who have been talking about that if we don't do it, then probably we might be branded as anti-national. All I would like to tell them is, this is your country, this is your Tiranga, fly your Tiranga high. Nobody's going to look at you differently because if you don't do it, because you are part of this country, you're part of this constitution, you're part of this beautiful soil. So continue being an Indian as you are. Difference of opinion is the basis, the most beautiful part about a democratic country like India. And this difference of opinions and differences will continue, but we as Indians, how much ever we fight with each other, when it comes to the country, we will always stand united. And I have that faith in my fellow countrymen and my fellow very esteemed panelists who, though we belong to different parties, I think this is what is important, and this is what we'll fight for. Sare jahan se acha Hindustata hamara, and this is one song which we'll continue to sing all our lives and for many generations to come.
All right, well, let's talk about integrity. I think that's a great way of ending this program. Let's remember what we're all actually about and celebrate our diversity, which lies at the heart of any sense of nationalism, I would argue. I'd like to thank you all very much for being with us, and a very happy Independence Day to all of you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vishnu.